impacts on natural resources in a way that's why it's not providing quite what it was. So that's why we put together this book in the campaign, really to connect people to each other again and really remind ourselves just how much is at stake. And our goal with all of this is to leave a legacy for future generations. We need to leave it better than we found it. And we want young people to thrive in the future as well. So I love, and I think these tulips may be up at this time of year as well. So that's a little bit about the place itself. And just as a transition, I think all of us have seen some pretty ridiculous media and social media coverage where COVID-19 has brought out some of the worst in people. But in my view, I'm also seeing that it's also bringing out some of the best in people as well. And frankly, we're beginning to see people identifying needs right now that we never anticipated and start to pull together in ways that are so important. And that's why we're thrilled today to introduce you to two people who are stepping up in this time of need to address food insecurity and to create new markets to strengthen our local economy. So if you think about it, we're in an area where food growers, they do have the capacity to grow food and feed us, but their customer markets have been disrupted. As restaurants and farmers markets shut down, supply chains are disrupted. There's insecurity on the part of growers. And then other people are experiencing extreme food insecurity as well, maybe due to job losses or hoarding of patterns, hoarding patterns in store. There's just a lot of anxiety. So that's why we wanted to talk a little bit about things that are happening right now and things that you can do in your communities. So again, I'm going to start introducing, but don't forget to use your chat box about there or so to type questions, and we're going to compile those as we go. So it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, a native of Dhaka, Bangladesh. Tamina Martali lived in Yemen before arriving at a farm in Idaho. A registered dietitian by education, Tamina has worked with refugee and immigrant resiliency projects for the last 25 years. And before arriving in Seattle, she taught at the University of Utah in nutrition and integrated physiology on food and culture. And she worked at the Salt Lake City Mayor's office as the refugee liaison. Tamina has been with World Relief Seattle since 2016, where she's created the resiliency and empowerment programs. And this includes the Women's Sewing Program for pre-literate women to build capacity and depaving over an acre of parking lot to build a community garden that increases food access for refugee and immigrant families. And she describes this in her profile in We Are Puget Sound. So this is a really unique community garden. It's also one of the largest green stormwater infrastructure sites in King County and provides an intersection for environmental justice and equity for marginalized communities. Tamina, over to you.
Thank you, Mindy. Hello, everyone. These are unusual times, but I think it also presents unusual opportunities. So I'm going to share some pictures with you and those of you who have never heard about some of the work we're doing or who we are as World Relief. I'm going to start the kind of video now. Let me, okay. Again, my name is Tamina Martali, and as Mindy said, I work at World Relief Seattle, and we are a refugee resettlement and services organization that's been around since 1979. Definitely, we're called World Relief Seattle, but we are primarily in South King County. Because of housing issues and rising costs within the boundaries of Seattle itself, it's really difficult to place newcomers and new neighbors in the Seattle area. And so we're based primarily in kind of the South King County area. And kind of the focus of the work we do is not only receiving people, and I came to this country as an asylee, receiving people straight from the airport. And in this particular picture, as you can see, somebody with an IOM bag. Often families come with just items that are in those plastic bags that has all the documents and few key items to begin new life in the United States. And one of the things beyond the initial resettlement process of getting people rooted in a new community and learning all about what's happening, as we began to talk and as I began to talk to people in the community over time, once they've been resettled for a little while, what the community really wanted most was a place to grow food that they missed in a new place that they couldn't find at the grocery store, and a way to connect back with the soil again, especially when you're in apartment complexes and you're so disconnected from the ground. It's really nice to have a place to grow food, have a place for children to be safe and to play, have access to organic food that they could get to with using public transportation, because many newcomers do not have access to cars. And then a place to gather and make new friends and learn things together. A lot of the apartment complexes where we're placing families, they're safe, they're affordable, but there's a distinct lack of green space. So a lot of times kids are playing in the parking lot, and families are fined $250 the first time the kids are caught playing in the parking lot, and then begin eviction proceedings. So that's the need for not only culturally appropriate foods, but green spaces to play is really, really important. And so kind of the backstory of this particular slide is kind of a snapshot of looking at places where people could actually grow their own food. This is from 2.5 years ago. And if you could see the cluster of all of the red dots, those are kind of pea patch programs within Seattle. And if you look at the kind of the 3 lonely dots towards South King County, at that time, there was only 3 community gardens that were available, or spaces where people could go that we could even refer them to grow food that they could get to by public transportation. So this partnership with Hillside Church was really important because they had a large area, 6 acres, but they had 1 whole acre of underutilized parking lot that they donated for use to be able to grow food. It had some problems on that site because this is what happened when it rained, because it is on a hill and it's paved, so there's not a chance for water to go anywhere. It regularly flooded the neighborhoods below. So with a thoughtful plan and input from the community, we came up with this design, included the community in that process to begin depaving over 50,000 square feet of asphalt, using many, many volunteers to actually build out a place for people to grow food. This is kind of pre and post pictures. We have 50 places, plots where people can grow food, 44 in-ground and 6 handicap accessible ones. Not only is this kind of a really interactive site for people to grow food, but it's one of the largest examples of a multiple green stormwater infrastructure. We're capturing water from the roof, the church building nearby. So 80% of the irrigation comes from captured rainwater, using cover cropping techniques, as well as, this is kind of a short, fun little video to show what happens when you're trying to get water from cisterns in a parking lot to places where people can grow food. It's quite the endeavor. But the amazing thing about including entire communities is how many people come together to make that happen, especially for newcomers who are really wanting to have access. So 17 volunteer plumbers came together so that we could have access to rainwater and then 14 hose bibs, so everyone had access. We engaged refugee middle school and high school youth to design rain gardens in site. We have 5 on site. And so far we've had 1,600 volunteers helping and counting. This is kind of a microcosm of what can happen. Not only are we trying to give access to food, to grow food that they recognize, but solving issues going right into the Salish Sea and the Puget Sound so that we can have cleaner water and affect the beautiful salmon that Mindy shared, the pictures that she shared, because we do, whether we're newcomers or not, live in shared communities. So the land and the sea and the air matter. So far this year, we have 23 countries represented in the place where they're growing food from 23 different countries. And many, they will tell us that we may not speak each other's language, but we managed to be understood. And so what was once a neglected parking lot is a thriving place where people can grow food, and a place for the kids to play safely without being fined, and kids and families coming together. We're also putting in a bioswale using and a food forest so that there will be long-term food and not just seasonal food. This is kind of the future plan. So this is kind of this place that we're working on to include the community. But what has happened through this COVID-19 is expose some of the things that we already knew in terms of inequity and access, but it's kind of brought it into stark relief. So between the gap from when people can actually plant food and when they can harvest to have them, the loss of jobs and the access for even new people. So for instance, arrivals who came in January or February, some of them maybe who started work only for a week or two and then they were laid off, they can't qualify for unemployment. Or those who may not have actually all their documentations in place yet, they won't qualify for food benefits, SNAP, or WIC, or any of those other things that can get them through this particular process. And so again, figuring out the gaps of what happens now where families are in crisis. And then also if you live in South King County, the resources are less. So we set up one of 2 sites that we know of in all of South King County, where Northwest Harvest, we're able to partner with them to do food distribution. And even that is currently in jeopardy. So this is a picture from just this last week. And you notice all those extra cans that are on outside. And those are our attempt to make the boxes more halal, because many of the items that are prepackaged in these boxes are not only not fresh item, non-perishable, but they include ham and pork and other products that those who practice Islam are not able to eat. So we didn't want it to be wasteful. We wanted to make sure that people received food that they could actually use. And also keeping volunteers and others safe. And it's been amazing to see how many past and present participants, even those who don't have enough themselves, stepping up to help others. And a local friend of mine who's a local farmer was able to bring some of the eggs from her farm and share it. As you can see, these are half dozen pieces. And this last week, we were able to pass out 65 dozen eggs to families. It wasn't enough, but it was something nice and fresh that we were able to do. And again, doing perishable items is difficult as well because refrigeration and aggregation and getting it to people during this time while keeping people safe. We're doing a drive-through method, which again means you need to have a car. And if you don't have a car, even if we have a site where you're giving food, makes it difficult to come and get. And so we are also doing deliveries. We've been this past week, we delivered to 120 different family households who don't have access to vehicles, who have younger children, or who are even more isolated and marginalized to be able to drop off boxes to their homes. I had to cap it at a hard cap because we just don't have enough resources and drivers to get food to families, so that they could receive it. And when they're relying on public transportation to even get to a grocery store or even get to a food distribution site or a site where sandwiches and other things are given out for the school district school lunches has been really, really impactful during this time. Beecher's Cheese was one of the partners that we reached out to, who was amazing to be able to give kind of their local handcrafted cheese. That's me cutting a ginormous block of 40 pounds of cheese into smaller pieces so that people could have eggs and cheese along with their non-perishable items. And during this time, it's been making connections and seeing who can come together during this crisis to reach people. We were able to serve 350 families, and it's kind of a week-by-week process to see if we will even have food this coming week because food banks are heavily stretched during this time. So these are just some of the things to think about, that even when we figure out in urban spaces how people can have actually access to land and places to grow food, as we are working to incubate farmers to have larger pieces of land where they can grow their own food, even during a crisis like this, a pandemic, what comes to the forefront really is, even with having those kind of limited accesses, it really shows us the kind of the divide and the issues, especially that we see happening in South King County compared to other areas. That's what I have for you today. I'm open to questions later.
Great, thank you, Tamina. And Erica, I think you can probably hear me at this point. No need to start my video again. I would love to introduce our next panelist, Melissa Campbell. Requesting to start my video. Okay, so you'll have a face to go with the disembodied voice. Melissa Campbell is the Executive Director of PCC Farmland Trust, And over the last decade, she has helped shape the organization's farmland protection, stewardship, and conservation finance initiatives, including developing the organization's first impact investment opportunity. Prior to her work at the Trust, Melissa worked on diverse conservation and natural resource initiatives from farmland in the Midwest to forest lands along the West Coast. Melissa holds a bachelor's degree from the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences at Ohio State University and a master's degree where she studied the connections between our local communities and working landscapes. She joins us today to share the approach to farmland protection that the Trust has developed over the last 20 years and the role that the organization plays within the broader food and farming system. She'll touch on the impacts of COVID-19 experienced by the Trust, as well as what the Trust is hearing from local farmers and rural agricultural communities. Over to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Mindy, for that really nice and warm introduction. I hope you all are safe and healthy and finding comfort in these really unusual times. As Mindy said, I've had the privilege of working with the Trust and side by side with our farming communities across the state for almost 12 years now. And you know, the one thing I've learned about our farmers is that they are adaptable and resilient, and some of the most creative, inspiring, compassionate, and entrepreneurial people I know. And that hasn't changed despite this pandemic. So I'd like to share a little bit of background about the Farmland Trust and kind of who we are and what our priorities are, and then dive into some of the impacts we're seeing on the ground. So as our name might suggest, we were founded by PCC Community Markets over 20 years ago. We are and always have been a separate organization with our own board and budget. Yet PCC has played a critical role in supporting the sustainable growth of our organization. And today we call them our founder, our funder, and our friend. And as a statewide accredited land trust since our inception, the trust has been buying and conserving agricultural land to stem the tide of land lost to development across our state. And we've been scaling our work specifically over the past 5 years to meet the considerable need for farmland protection, particularly here in Western Washington. And in our first 15 years, we've protected 1,200 acres across the state. And in the past 5 years alone, we've protected an additional 1,300 acres in Puget Sound. Today, we have 23 farms protected forever, which represents 2,500 acres. And we have the opportunity to conserve an additional 1,700 acres of some of the best farmland in Puget Sound. And these farms range in size from 21 acres all the way up to almost 600 acres and support diverse operations. This is both exciting and daunting in these really uncertain times. But our mission is steadfast, and we know that we need farms and farmers more than ever, and we need them to produce local food for our community. So that is for sure. And over the past 5 to 6 years, we've been laser focused on Puget Sound farmland, recognizing it's most vulnerable to conversion, specifically farmland in Pierce and Snohomish counties, which are two of the fastest growing counties in the entire nation. And they also have some of the best soils in the entire world. And despite historic farmland loss in this region, there are nearly 5,000 farms in King, Pierce, and Snohomish County. And in Western Washington, we have about 44% of our state farms on the west side of the state. So that we have thriving agricultural communities here. As our organization has evolved over the past few decades, we've recognized the need to not only address farmland conservation, but farm and farmer viability. After all, once a farm goes out of production, it's most vulnerable to conversion out of agriculture. And so after a year of research and feasibility, we launched a program we call Farm to Farmer, which you can learn more about at farmtofarmer.org. And Farm to Farmer aims to support farmers and farm landowners by keeping land in production. It's a land matching tool that has both an online platform and is staffed by a local farmer, and matches farmers who are looking for land with landowners who want to keep their land in production. The program currently serves ag communities in Pierce, King, and Skagit counties. And we see that focusing on farm and farmer viability are our first line of defense in protecting our regional farmland. We here at the Farmland Trust are pivoting our 2 farm-to-farmer staff members who run our farm-to-farmer program in Pierce and King County to be the organization's front line in coordinating with local farmers across the region to work together to find solutions, amidst this pandemic. And as Tamina was mentioning, this global pandemic has pointed out the structural challenges that we face in building an equitable and economically sustainable food system. The question then for us becomes, how can we take this moment and this moment of recognizing the need for fresh local food and translate that into lasting solutions for our people and our planet and our plates? And how can we create lasting change in this moment? And while certain systems will inevitably be set up to design to meet immediate needs, the challenge will be to create sustainable and durable systems so that our food system is stronger and more resilient the next time we face a crisis like this. In the national media, we're seeing themes related to food and agriculture. We were reading things about wasted food, tight labor markets, vulnerable workers, and potential for disrupted supply chains. Here at the Farmland Trust, we recognize the state of farming and farmland is already really precarious, and the pandemic is piling on top of what farmers face already on an everyday basis: narrow margins, tough working conditions, escalating land prices, and a global pandemic puts additional strain on our farmers and food supply. Added to this, our average age of our farmer here in Washington and nationally is 58, which puts them really close to being in the vulnerable population and vulnerable to complications related to COVID-19. Yet at the same time, our farmers have seen an uptick in demand for fresh local product, which this dynamic creates both an opportunity and a conundrum about how to quickly and safely deploy products into our communities. The closure of reliable markets and large institutional cafeterias like those at Google and Amazon and Facebook, as well as closures of restaurants and wholesale accounts and farmers markets have significantly impacted our state's farm businesses. Lack of aggregation and distribution has been acknowledged by many and identified as being a barrier to be able to get more food to people. As well as lack of online sales and online stores. It's also been identified by many farmers as a significant barrier to get product to people. We here at the Farmland Trust are also experiencing impacts. Along with a lot of our other nonprofit and even for-profit colleagues here in this region, we face a lot of economic uncertainty. What will happen if farmland prices drop, or will prices skyrocket? As we've been reading about, there are some projections about Midwestern farmland, given the high demand for food, that prices of farmland are actually going to go up, which means they're going to be even further out of reach for our local farmers. Will federal funding be delivered to advance the trust conservation projects? Right now, we have $6 million worth of federal funding that's in limbo in DC. Yet, despite these challenges, our farmers and farmland owners are finding solutions to feed us all, and we're working on that here at the Trust. What we're hearing is that farmers are mobilizing their teams quickly to fill the demand. Home delivery, no contact pickup sites, aggregation with other farms have enabled farmers to get more food to markets. Farmers are looking at new safety considerations and protocols every day. And as my colleague and local farmer, Amy Moreno-Sills says, it's all hands on deck and they're getting things done. We're seeing a lot of great examples of farmers working together with their local communities to solve this problem and jump on this opportunity to create more food. A few examples are here at the Farmland Trust, our 2 farm-to-farmer coordinators are leading conversations and discussions with local farmers and are acting as the front line for the trust and listening and learning from local communities about what the needs are and what the barriers are for farmers. A few weeks ago, one of our staff members led a Zoom call with several hundred participants from all over the state and partners like Washington Young Farmers Coalition to help identify what those barriers are for farmers. And yes, just last night, she led a Pierce County focused conversation with Pierce County farmers to help build relationships and then identify hyper-local needs in the Pierce County community. And based on the success of that event, we're looking at replicating that with our farm to farmer coordinator here in King County. So while we recognize these sort of broad impacts of to the farmers and food system, some of the solutions and challenges are also hyper-local, which is why we're trying to understand the statewide need and the national need, but then drill down into the local communities where we're working to identify solutions and barriers. PCC Farmland Trust farmers Ray and Tom Williams worked together with another trust farmer, Joel Hughesby, out in Walla Walla to deliver 580 pounds of local organic flour to their local food bank. Local citizens are organizing friends and family to do bulk orders of flours and food products and helping to get farm product from farms to the city. And this type of cooperation has been helpful to farmers who don't have an active online presence or lack appropriate broadband and don't have established online store delivery functions. We're seeing our community really reach out to our farmers and figure out how they can help them get their product to people who need it. And there's an increasing acknowledgement that our farms and food banks have similar challenges with aggregation and distribution in this moment. And several talks are underway about how to get more fresh food to people in need and how farmers and food banks can work together more intentionally. And so we're often asked, what is one thing that people can do? And I'd really like to take this moment today to point people toward community-supported agriculture. And if you can do one thing today, join a community-supported agriculture program. I saw that Civil Eats just released an article today about how CSA shares are booming right now. So be quick about it. But shares are becoming available for many of our local farmers and farm businesses. And the beauty of this structure, this business structure for farmers, is it puts cash in the hand of farmers now versus waiting till they deliver product in the summer. So you pay up front and then you reap the rewards in the summertime. And so this provides a lot of stability for our farmers. And of course, then you get the local product. And if you're able, some of our farmers have the ability where you can donate a share to a family in need who's not able to cover the cost of a CSA share. We'll share some resources at the end of this presentation about how you might be able to do that. And, you know, with the ingenuity and creativity and energy that are being put in by our farmers to help solve this problem, my hope is that we can find ways to overcome the inequities in our food system and create new and lasting opportunities to provide fresh food for our community. And, you know, and in closing, I just want to say, you know, we acknowledge we're living through unprecedented times, and it's clear that above all else, our local food supply matters now more than ever. And we here at the Trust are committed to ensuring that our food supply is sustained, and we'll do that no matter what comes our way. So solidarity to you all, and I hope you all are healthy and well and taking good care, and look forward to continuing to work on solutions to help a sustainable, equitable food system into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And turning it back over here. As we get set up for question and answer, just wanted to talk a little bit about some actions that you can take personally. And these have multiple benefits really for you, your family, and the larger communities. And as you've heard from both Tamina and Melissa, this coronavirus pandemic, it's impacting people's abilities to access food, producers' ability to provide it to all of us. And really, this is the time to focus our own efforts on community care actions to support each other. In doing so, we're supporting our regional farmers and fishers who grow and harvest food in ways that don't negatively impact our shared waters. We're strengthening local economies, improving food security, and also supplying community food co-ops. So as both have mentioned as well, the COVID crisis, it's exacerbated these systemic inequalities that are impacting some communities even harder than others. And that's where, as I've been talking with folks, some people, they're worried about having enough food in the months ahead, but others are worried about having food tomorrow. So that's why these resources that you see here are focusing on actions that really ensure food security for all. I wanted to call your attention to under more resources, there's a few that we'll talk through here, but under more resources, there's some great regional resources for people in Whatcom and Skagit County and Pierce County as well. And all of these actions will be available. So if you're worried about scribbling them out right now, if you go to our website at wearepugetsound.org/action, you'll see all of these identified there. And I personally, I feel inspired by work that people like Melissa and Tamina are doing. And we know all of us need to do our parts to heal communities in the wake of this pandemic. So this helps protect and restore our own health and also the health of our communities around us. So with that, I also wanted to call your attention. Mountaineers Books is offering discounts right now. We are at their mountaineers.org/books website as more people are at home. So I am looking through my notes here. Melissa, I'm going to start maybe with a question for you. I'm super fortunate to be a CSA customer in Pierce County at Wild Hare Farms. And it's a privilege for me because I'm able to pay in advance for being part of this CSA. Can you talk a little bit more about the work that's being done on systems for increasing maybe direct sales for farmers, but maybe aren't part of CSA at this point?
Yeah, we're just a couple of examples. We're seeing some really interesting collaboration among farmers to aggregate their product and work together to deliver that product into the farm. So they're actually sort of on the fly putting boxes together of product and then creating no contact drop sites within various cities, whether it's Tacoma or Seattle. Another really inspiring model I've seen coming out of the South Sound is the coming together of local business with local farmers. So local bakers, local, I think, mushroom producers and egg producers putting together a really diverse box. So typically your CSA box is full largely of vegetables, sometimes flowers or fruit. But this time they're sort of rounding out the whole plate, so to speak. And that's a unique opportunity to try that model, but it's also really helpful to people who have different business models and a diversity of products to kind of curate, so to speak, a box that could round out someone's plate nutritionally and aesthetically, I suppose. But yeah, we're seeing high collaboration between people to get a diversity of product in the same box and delivered to communities in a safe way too. I think safety is of high consideration for a lot of folks as well.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Tamina, the next question is for you. And maybe you can also talk to us a little bit about the choose where most needed for helping immediate needs at World Leaf Seattle. But the question is, I have 2 teenagers at home. Are there any volunteer opportunities that I can get them involved with to help address food access issues?
Right now, even with kind of the food distribution, we have to be really careful of how many volunteers we allow on site just for safety and distancing issues and providing masks for each one and gloves. And so we're working on a week by week basis, even locally, and then working with other local organizations that are serving refugee and immigrant populations. So you can email me, but we're working with a smaller list of volunteers just because of kind of the distancing issues on site. So that's the kind of the short answer. Over time, because we don't know how this will play out, having a list kind of ongoing volunteers who can come would be helpful. As some can come on certain weeks, we can utilize others.
Great, thank you, Tamina. And the next question is also for you. How are you considering scaling up the rain gardens and pea patch gardens? Are there any state grants that might be helpful here, like through the Recreation and Conservation Office?
Some of the funding that I've utilized has been through King County and scaling up through, so these are in South King County. There are more funding available again within the boundaries of Seattle. Like for instance, there's RainWise programs and other things. In kind of the South King County area, there's not a concerted group of funding that's available. As we're planning out, because we have another garden site in partnership with a Lutheran church in downtown Kent, as we're looking at additional sites, one of the things that a lot of our gardeners and participants have said is they are wanting larger plots of land. So the incubation period of where they can become not a large scale farmer, but kind of in between, kind of a market garden size. So 400 to 500 square feet of space each to garden, not necessarily several acres, so that they can incubate into bigger scaled gardens. Finding land that's accessible, and again, we've been, talking to PCC, Farmland Trust too, connecting land to farmers, but finding it where they're able to access it easily. And that's always an ongoing challenge. And then when we do find the land, looking at, okay, what are some other options that we can multi-use of the land? For instance, GSI features, perhaps rainwater capture if that's available to make it more viable and have multi-use. So those are in the works for the future. But yeah, it's an ongoing challenge, finding land, finding funding, and putting those pieces together.
Thank you, Tamina. Melissa, the next question is for you. You mentioned Snohomish County has one of the best soils for farming. What would you need to expand the farm to farmer program in Snohomish County?
Funny, they should ask. We've been working on a business plan. There's sort of life before COVID-19 and life after. So I'll speak to life before COVID-19 as an organization. We've been thinking a lot about how to deploy this program across the state, given that we know that there's high interest about that. We work in Snohomish County really deeply with great local partners there and are actively thinking about how to get farm to farmer working in Snohomish County. I think post COVID-19 just begs we're really paying attention to organizational stability and health, and looking over a long period of time. Everything that I've been reading has been saying, we may not organizationally be impacted in a year, but it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years out from now. So our initial hopes and dreams were to roll out an expanded farm to farmer program in the next few years. We're revisiting what that looks like in light of all the uncertainty now, but it's a logical and natural next step for us. And so we're trying to figure out creative ways to meet the need on the ground, but also not extend ourselves too much in light of all this uncertainty. And send me an email and let's talk, whoever asked that question.
Well, thank you. And thanks for the prompt about, I couldn't see the actual share my screen. So we're all learning new technology these days. So sorry about that. So now you should be able to see where you can access some resources here. A question for you, Tamina. What can organizations and individuals do to help refugee and immigrant communities? If you could ask for anything, what would you ask for of those who have the power to provide or advocate for what you need?
Well, as you can see on this resource list, the donate link for World Relief and then choosing where most needed gives us the flexibility to really help those who are extremely hard hit during this time, especially during COVID-19. But if I could ask for, I think looking systemically and long-term, especially now and moving forward, if one thing I could ask for is really the disparity that I see over and over again. And I've lived in this area just a little over 3 years. And so I'm learning as I've lived here, what it looks like, what I see the resources and the lack of in South King County. It's really startling compared to what's available within Seattle and even a little bit more north. And often kind of the diversity and the larger amounts of refugee immigrant population resides in South King County and Kent, Auburn, Federal Way, Des Moines area. And then what's becoming obvious even during this pandemic time is even getting access to food boxes. So Northwest Harvest is the kind of the provider for South King County, but they're having a hard time we are one of the only sites that's providing food boxes for families, but they're having a difficult time to even assure that if we would get any. So that kind of advocacy to say, let's think about people in South King County, let's think about refugee immigrant populations when we're looking at kind of overall, like a lot of different things with food access, with even educational access, with myriad of things. And when you're talking to your county council members, when you're talking to anyone, like bringing that up and advocating for that It's really, really important. And the more people hear about it, the more the need is made and the disparities made more obvious. Hopefully we will see some concerted action.
Thank you. And we have time for a couple more questions. There's some questions about how people can support and purchase from tribal fishing communities. Does anybody have resources on that? If not, I think that might be something we can work on the website itself. I know there've been several conversations among my friends as well, but anybody here of resources there?
I'm sorry to say I don't have any resources on that front.
Okay. One question for you, Melissa, and kind of thinking about long-term here, how are you ensuring equitable distribution or transfer of farmland ownership or access? Are there BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, people of color farmers? Are they able to afford and access land, or any ideas on what's moving in that direction?
That is such a good question. That is a question that the Trust is asking ourselves right now. We're amidst a deep dive on diversity, equity, inclusion, starting with the acknowledgement that land has been a tool for which historic inequities have been perpetuated, and land is the primary tool of our organization. And so organizationally, we're starting by understanding what our own personal biases are and organizational biases, and uncovering those, understanding institutional biases, and really being careful to look before we leap, but but not letting perfect be the enemy of the good in this work, and that, to start now. And so what I can say about that is that it's top of mind for the Trust. It's our 20th year as an organization, and this will definitely be a lens through which we will now and forevermore think about our work. And I don't have any specific solutions about what that looks like, except that it's an acknowledgement. We're doing some deep work organizationally on the internal side, and hope that we can get to work and creating some partnerships and lasting solutions for addressing some of these inequities. It's just, we are not able to talk about our work and our mission and our vision. And I have a small child with me here now. I wondered when that was going to happen, but it's, this is Sylvie, and we're actively thinking about what that looks like right now. And there's a lot of great work being done locally and regionally and nationally that we can look to help be a guide to us.
Mom, do you mind if I take?
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. There's lots more questions in the chat box, and I think a few people have also identified other resources. What we'll do is we won't be able to address them all right now, but we'll look at trying to expand those resources on the website as well. So keep checking back at wearepugetsound.org action on this, and let's transition here and maybe give our speakers a virtual round of applause for all of the great resources that they shared with us today. I did want to wrap up with a thank you to all of the people who made this webinar possible. This was an experiment. We're all learning technology. We're all learning how to do this. Thank you to all the folks at Braided River and Washington Environmental Council for your work. Thank you, Melissa and Tamina, for telling your stories of the work you're doing with your communities. And really our goal here is we hope we've helped you connect with some food resources in your own community, and maybe start thinking about, as you satisfy your own needs and the needs of your families, maybe thinking about creative ways to pitch in and help other communities in this time of need. And in doing so, our hope is that we're really replumbing connections. We're valuing each other in the coming weeks and coming months in ways that will be beneficial for all of us in the coming years. So it is now my pleasure to wrap up and introduce you to Cheryl Weiser. So Cheryl is both the Farm Guide Program Director at Tilth Alliance, and she's also a Seattle-based singer-songwriter. So thank you so much for tuning in, and over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Mindy, and thank you to everyone for being here today and for such an incredible webinar. And I was really thrilled to be asked to do this song. I play this song quite a bit, and it has more meaning now than ever before. And it's really about how we stand up for ourselves, how we stand up for one another in community, and how we show up. So without any more talking, this is for you, all of you. No, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. No, I'll stand my ground, won't be turned around. I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. I won't back down. I will stand my ground. Well, I know what's right. I got just this one life. World that keeps on pushing us around, but we stand our ground, and we won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. I will stand my ground, won't back down. No, I won't back down. No, I won't back down.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. That was really beautiful. And thank you again, everyone, for coming today and sharing this with us. I think I am on screen. Oh dear. Yeah, and thank you for the audience for joining us. And we encourage you to check out the resources that all of these really amazing leaders have offered, and consider supporting them in whatever makes sense for you. And right now on our website at mountaineersbooks.org, if you use the code Time to Read, you will receive a 25% discount on any of our books. We're a nonprofit and have a lot of books on food and farming through our Skipstone imprint. Again, the discount is Time to Read, but if you don't have a pencil, don't worry, we'll email it to you in a day or two. We're going to do another web event on April 23rd featuring Bill Thorness, who's one of our authors and a local gardener, and his presentation will be all about getting your victory garden started in these times, or if you a lot of people have a lot more time on their hands right now, to maybe start thinking about how to turn some of your yard into some food space. So you can check out our website for more of our author events, and in the meantime, we hope you're staying safe and finding ways to enjoy all that the outdoors has to offer during this time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.